as I have said, and it is permanent in the Kiowa mind. You see, there was symbolic meaning in that November sky. With the coming of natural dawn, there began a new and darker age for the Kiowa people, and the last culture to evolve in North America began to decline. Within 4 years of the falling stars, the Kiowas signed their first treaty with the United States government. Within 20 years, 4 major epidemics of smallpox and Asiatic cholera destroyed more than half their number, and within scarcely more than a generation, their horses and weapons were taken from them, and the herds of buffalo were slaughtered and left to waste upon the plains. Do you see what happens when the imagination is superimposed upon the historical event? Awful memory. They appropriated it, recreated it, fashioned it into an image of themselves. In short, they imagined it. And by means of that act of the imagination, could they bear what happened to them thereafter? No defeat, no humiliation, no suffering was beyond their power to endure, for none of it was meaningless. They could say to themselves, yes, it was all meant to be in its time. The order of the world was broken, that was clear. Even the stars were shaken loose in the night sky. The imagination of meaning. It was not much, perhaps, but it was all they had, and it was enough to sustain them. A writer for whom I have great admiration, Isak Dinesen, said this: all sorrows can be borne if you put them into a story, or tell a story about them. The Kiowa tales, which are contained in The Way to Rainy Mountain, constitute a kind of literary chronicle. In a sense, they are the milestones of that old migration in which the Kiowas journeyed from the Yellowstone to the Washita. They record a transformation of the tribal mind as it encounters for the first time the landscape of the Great Plains. They evoke the sense of search and of discovery. Many of the tales are very old, and they have not until now been set down in writing. Among them, there is one that stands out in my mind. When I was a child, my father told me the story of the arrow maker, and he told it to me many times, for I fell in love with it. I have no memory that is older than that of hearing this story. If an arrow is well made, it will have tooth marks upon it. That is how you know. The Kiowas made fine arrows and straightened them in their teeth. Then they drew them to the bow to see that they were straight. Once there was a man and his wife. They were alone at night in their tepee. By the light of a fire, the man was making arrows. After a while, he caught sight of something. There was a small opening in the tepee where 2 hides had been sewn together. Someone was there on the outside, looking in. The man went on with his work, but he said to his wife, "Someone is standing outside. Do not be afraid. Let us talk easily, as of ordinary things." Then, as it was right for him to do, he took an arrow and straightened it in his teeth. Then he drew it to the bow and took aim, first in this direction and then in that. And all the while he was talking, as if to his wife. But this is how he spoke. "I know that you are there on the outside, for I can feel your eyes upon me. If you are a Kiowa, you will understand what I am saying, and you will speak your name. But there was no answer, and the man went on in the same way, pointing the arrow all around. At last, his aim fell upon the place where his enemy stood, and he let go of the string. The arrow went straight to the enemy's heart. Well, until now, the story of the arrow maker has been the private possession of a very few, a tenuous link in that most ancient chain of language which we call the oral tradition. Tenuous because the tradition itself is so. For as many times as that story has been told, it was always but one generation removed from extinction. But it was cherished, too, and for the same reason. That is to say, it has been neither more nor less durable than the human voice, and neither more nor less concerned to express the fundamental meaning of the human condition. And this brings me to the matter at hand. The story of the arrow maker is also a link between language and literature, between language and religion. It is a remarkable act of the mind, a realization of words and a realization of the world that is altogether simple and direct, yet nonetheless rare and profound. And it illustrates more clearly than anything else in my own experience, at least, something of the essential character of the imagination, and in particular of that personification which in this instance emerges from the imagination, the man made of words. It is a fine story, I think you will agree, whole, intricately beautiful, precisely realized. It is worth thinking about, for it yields something of value. Indeed, it is full of provocation, rich with suggestion and consequent meaning. It is informed by an integrity that bears examination easily and well. And in the process, it seems to appropriate our own reality, our own experience, our own conception of the truth. It is significant that the story of the arrow maker returns upon itself in a special way. It is about language, after all, and it is therefore part and parcel of its own subject. Virtually, there is no distinction, no difference between the telling and that which is told. The point of the story lies not so much in what the arrow maker does, but in what he says. The principal fact is that he speaks, and in so doing he places his very life in the balance. It is this aspect of the story which might interest us most, for it is here that the language becomes most conscious of itself, and we are very close to the origin and object of literature. Our sense of the verbal dimension is very keen, and we are aware of something in the nature of language that is at once perilous and compelling. If you are a Kiowa, you will understand what I am saying, and you will speak your name. Everything is ventured in this simple declaration, which is also a question and a plea. The conditional element with which it begins is remarkably tentative and pathetic. Precisely at this moment is the arrow maker realized completely, and his reality consists in language, and it is poor and precarious. And all of this occurs to him as surely as it does to us. Implicit in that simple occurrence is all of his definition and all of his destiny. He ventures to speak because he must. Language is the repository of his whole knowledge and experience, of his whole being, and it represents the only chance he has for survival. Instinctively and with great care, he deals in the most honest way with words. Let us talk easily as of ordinary things. And of the ominous unknown, he asks only the utterance of a name, only that most nominal sign that he has understood, that his words are returned to him on the sheer edge of meaning. But there is no answer. And the arrow maker knows at once what he has not known before, that his enemy is, and that he, the arrow maker, has gained an advantage over his enemy. This he knows certainly, and the certainty itself is his advantage, and it is crucial, and he makes the most of it, and he survives. The venture is complete and irrevocable, and for the arrow maker it ends in success. The story is meaningful. It is so primarily because it is composed of language, and it is in the nature of language that it proceeds to the formulation of meaning. Moreover, the story of the arrow maker, as opposed to other stories in general, centers upon this procession of words towards meaning. It seems, in fact, to turn upon the very idea that language involves the elements of risk and responsibility. And in this, the story seeks to confirm itself. In a word, it seems to say, everything is a risk. That may be so, and it may be that the whole of literature rests upon that truth. The arrow maker is preeminently the man made of words. He has consummate being in language. It is the world of his origin and of his posterity, and there is no other. But it is a world of definite reality and of infinite possibility. I have come to believe that there is a sense in which the arrow maker has more nearly perfect being than have other men by and large, and perhaps a more nearly perfect right to be. We can imagine him as he imagines himself, whole and vital, going on into the unknown darkness and beyond. And this last aspect of his being is primordial and profound. And yet the story has it that he is cautious and alone. We are given to understand that his peril is great and immediate, and that he confronts it in the only way he can. I have no doubt that this is true, and I believe that there are implications which point directly to the determination of our ethical experience, and which must not be lost upon us. One final word, then, on an essential irony which marks this story and gives peculiar substance to the man made of words. The storyteller, the man who first told the story of the arrow maker, is nameless and illiterate. From one point of view, we know very little about him, except that he is somehow translated for us in the person of the arrow maker. But from another point of view, that is really all we need to know. He tells us of his life in language and of the awful risk involved. It must occur to us that he is one with the arrow maker, and that he has survived by word of mouth beyond other men. I said a moment ago that for the arrow maker, language represented the only chance for survival. It is worth considering that he survives in our time, and that he has survived over a period of untold generations. Aho.
They're not waving, they're ready. Dr. Momaday has agreed to answer a limited number of questions. So if you have questions, would you please raise your hand and stand up and speak loudly? You've answered all their questions already.
They have to formulate some. It'll take a minute. There is one. Yes, sir.
Dr. Momaday, my name is Walker. I think we've met before. And you asked me once whether I had ever found out the meaning of staked claims. And I had to say no. We corresponded about it. I'd like to ask you, do you know the origin now of the phrase staked claims? Have you ever found out?
I want to repeat the question.
Yes, the question is, have I found out since talking to Mr. Walker several years ago the meaning of the staked plains, that term, the staked plains, which refers to arboreal desert region of the Southwest, mainly in Texas? And the answer is no. I have heard a number of theories, but I still am not sure what the name refers to. The theory I like best is that it is such a vast region, and so many people were lost moving across it that journeymen then began staking their route through it so that they could return by means of the visible stakes in the ground. But that's just a theory. I'm not sure about it at all. If anyone in the audience knows and can enlighten us, please do. Yes.
In terms of the oral literature that's extant today, what is the degree of self-awareness of the importance of the tale as the teller tells them and retells them to be carried on? Is there built in to the tale that self-consciousness of importance?
I'm not sure that I understand the question. Can you give it to me once more?
As the chief or whoever carries on the oral tradition, is he aware that what he is carrying on is important, and does he instill that in the tales themselves, that indeed they are important and that they ought to be carried on?
Yes, I think I understand now. The question, could you all hear it? Okay. I think the answer is the storyteller is highly aware of his function, of what he is doing in passing on this verbal tradition from one generation to another. And I think that the tales do reflect that concern. One of the astounding things, one of the things that astounded me in looking into the Kiowa oral tradition was the fact that so many of the stories I ran upon had to do in one way or another with language, like the Arrowmaker story. That is a kind of an analogy of the oral tradition. It is true that the story really centers upon language and upon the importance of language and upon the understanding of the importance of language. And that's true of many stories in the oral tradition. So I think that there is a high degree of self-awareness, and that awareness is reflected very clearly in the stories themselves. Yes.
Do you see any, parallels within the Judeo-Christian tradition to an emphasis, say like from God on the word, and either in the spoken word or in this case the written word? Do you find any parallels within the tradition?
Do I find any parallels in the Judeo-Christian and Native American traditions, oral traditions? Yes. There are striking parallels on many different levels. I can't go into all of them here, but I can assure you that there are many, many parallels. The the naming ceremony, for example, naming, the idea of conferring a name upon something, and in that act conferring being upon that thing at the same time, is an ancient and biblical notion, of course, and it is widespread in the Indian world. It perhaps is more vital in the Indian world now than it is in the Judeo-Christian tradition. I'm just surmising that, but I know that it's very vital in the Indian world. I had another example in mind as I started that, and I've lost it. But I was going to say that an excellent brief discussion of some of those parallels is contained in Margot Astrove's introduction to the anthology, which is called The Winged Serpent, and it's a Capricorn paperback, readily available. American Indian Prose and Poetry, Margot Astrove, A-S-T-R-O-V. She talks about and refers particularly to the concept that in the beginning was the Word. So do I, by the way, in my novel, Housemaid of Dawn. Yes, sir.
There's a very definite implication within the commentaries of Deloria, as well as within the commentaries of the Wolf book that's just come out about our own philosophy, that we and the anthropologist hear, but does not reverence other stories. We may reverence our own, that's debatable, but we definitely do not reverence the native stories enough. And this implication is very strong within these two books and within much native literature of the world. Is it correct?
Could you all hear that question? There is a strong implication in some of Vine Deloria's writing and in other writings, recent writings, that the anthropologists hear but do not reverence the stories within Native American oral tradition. Is that true? I think it's true to an extent. I don't know how far I would want to generalize that point. I think it is probably true for the most part. However, there are exceptions. I know of anthropologists who are extremely sensitive to Indian traditions and who do reverence the stories in those traditions. I'm thinking particularly of such works as Theodora Kroeber's The Inland Whale, which seems to me a very sensitive treatment of California Indian stories, and there are other such things. Maybe the answer is that the sensitivity is increasing and that the situation is changing for the better. I hope so. Other questions? You can make comments too, or accusations, or whatever you want. Well, thank you for listening to me.